that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. This is the English section I have.
Sorry?
The, section that.
So this is the next section. This section you're gonna speak in English.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, need to
Pasatai
say.
mai kodi. Are we ready? Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome. Sorry, a little bit slow to get started today. Today I want to talk about the 2 years that changed the world, which is the pandemic, and specifically the effect that that's had on developers' salaries. Let me just click forward. This is me. I've been here in Thailand for 20 years, and I'm basically a tech person who does some recruitment. My colleague over here is Kun Ning. She's been working a lot in sales and recruitment for the last 5 years, so please feel free to say hello later on. Right, so how the pandemic has changed the way we work, and it's increased the demand for better systems, and what impact has that had on salaries? Right, the impact of the pandemic. You probably remember back that suddenly we had this massive change where people couldn't go into the office, and suddenly the companies who weren't set up for digital working were really struggling. And we saw a lot of headlines about this, yeah? That basically coronavirus sped up digital transformation in a way that companies could never have done themselves. And people were really pushing to get to do business online, because if they couldn't, customers were going to the places where they could do it. And we even see that coming here in Thailand, that Thailand was being affected and the companies who could sell online were doing well. Now, of course, to have better systems and be online, you need software developers. So they were talking about the opportunities that will create in software development. In fact, so much so that very early on people said, oh my gosh, we're going to run out of people to write all the systems that we now need. And it kept on going. This is from Manpower in Thailand. So even though a lot of other areas of employment weren't doing well, software development continued to be quite strong. Then you were seeing software houses where the demand was really picking up because they had so many customers saying, help, get us online. People want to know what we've got on stock. People want to be able to order online. Until we started seeing headlines like this about the labour crunch, i.e. the lack of you guys there. And the final one was actually from Forbes. How do you deal with the scarcity of developers? They didn't actually say crisis, but it pretty much almost felt like we had a desperate situation where there weren't enough people to build enough systems that people needed. So, one of the key trends we saw, of course, is that people had to work from home. And nobody really knew how to do it or could imagine it. In fact, one of our big clients I spoke to who was installing systems, and I didn't think this work could be done online. I said, how are you doing this? And he said, we could never have imagined doing this job remotely until we were forced to do it. But then we learned and we adapted. And then actually people liked it because consultants don't like having to travel to a different customer site every day and spend hours there and go back. Clients don't like paying for people to travel on site and come back. So suddenly everybody started working from home. The clients liked it better, the candidates liked it better, and it changed. Perhaps we saw a lot more hybrid work in companies where they were like, we want somebody to come into the office 1 or 2 days a week, we want the personal connection and to work out what's going on, but for the rest of the week you don't have to come in. I think in Thailand that really hit home because if you live up at the top end of Nonthaburi or you're in Lambuka and you were trying to come into the centre of Bangkok every day, I'm guessing you spent 3 to 4 hours travelling. And you know what? A lot of people really don't miss spending 3 or 4 hours a day travelling, and they suddenly realise how much they didn't want to travel anymore. So we partly had it, and I guess finally it's like remote tech work isn't going anywhere. It's here to stay. It's really changed. And of course, one of the things is there's always been outsourcing of software development to cheaper locations, particularly Asia. But now everybody was doing it, small companies were doing it, so suddenly you weren't limited to just somebody in Thailand. You could be looking anywhere, typically within the region because you wanted a similar time zone, but it did extend further. So what did that actually do to tech staff? Well, basically, the demand skyrocketed. It really went up. The supply went down. I've talked a lot about demographics in the past. If you want to know more, please go to a website called demographics.asia. But basically, a lot of countries are not having as many children, so there aren't so many young people anymore, so actually the supply is basically decreasing. And Western countries were particularly looking towards Asia. So the Europeans, when they couldn't find it, were looking towards Asia. America, which actually often pays high-tech salaries, started looking towards Europe to get work done. Time zones are a bit of an issue. It's easy to get developers to work late in the day. It's very hard to convince them to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and start work, so it tended to work on a delayed basis. And salaries skyrocketed. Now, you might ask how much, and our clients asked us a lot this year, so we actually did an analysis based upon what candidates were offered, not how much their salaries went up, but when they got a job offer, what was the average increase that they were being offered on base salary. Not everyone, by the way, got an increase, but this was the average of all of them. It was 35.4%. In most years, in recent times, it's probably been around about 10%. So if somebody was coming to us and they were on 100,000 baht, then on average, they were being offered 135,000 baht a month. Big increase. In actual point of fact, there were a lot of counter offers, people didn't take it. The actual number for what was successful for people to change companies was actually 38.9%. So if you happen to be a really good developer, it's been a great time for you from a monetary point of view. Where did the demand come? Product management, which is getting incredibly important for companies, because the product managers are really deciding what to develop, and they're grooming the requirements for the sprints. And it's incredibly important not to develop things you don't need, because it's so costly to do that now. UI, UX, everybody wants better and easier systems. To be honest, I'm surprised the demand hasn't gone up more in that area, but it's increasing. Developers, every language now is hot because there's such a shortage of developers we're seeing out there. DevOps continues to be strong, the guys who can help you deploy, particularly in public cloud. It wasn't quite as strong. Testers, probably the worst of the lot. We find manual testers, maybe automated testers before. Now it's impossible to find these guys, and it's an area where they've probably benefited the most from what we've seen. In terms of very specific skills, it actually says super hot and hot. It should probably say super, super hot and super hot, because there was almost nothing that people were looking for. JavaScript developers in particular is really strong. By that, typically we mean React and Vue with Node, with some of the key frameworks. Express is used a lot, but Nest and Next are fairly common favorites. C# has made a huge revival because of .NET Core. The performance of .NET Core on Linux is outstanding. It's about twice as fast. And because of its high performance, companies decided that they could go back to it. If you're looking, by the way, Microsoft confused everyone and they renamed .NET Core to .NET because they dropped their own .NET because it was so slow. So .NET 5 or .NET 6 actually means .NET Core. Golang, high performance language in certain situations, probably the only reason it's not used more is because of lack of developers. On the mobile front, overwhelmingly companies are looking to try and do a single version of the apps, and Flutter is the clear choice at the moment, which is done with the programming language Dart. And that's where we saw the most demand. On public cloud, AWS honestly is dominating, probably because of its flexibility, its marketing. You can run a Windows server, you can run serverless. Most people are running Kubernetes under their EKS service, although some have gone whole hog and are using ECS, which is Amazon's own service. Docker. As a developer now, you've really got to know about Docker containers. And the concept of container management, Kubernetes is still a favorite, even though most people don't need it. Automated testing, Selenium and Robot Framework are the clear winners there. Things that are still hot. Angular demand is very strong. AngularJS is getting a bit old now. PHP, particularly with Laravel, there's still a lot of companies using that, and we're seeing that. Python, of course, that gets used in data analytics a lot, but there are companies that are using it with Django or Flask as the main framework. Java, largely used by the banks, although some fintechs are using it. Spring Boot is clearly the dominant framework. C++, still demand for it, but because of WebAssembly, where you're going to be able to run your C++ code directly in the web browser, we think we're going to see a big bump in C++ soon because of that. Kotlin and Swift for writing your native apps, but we also saw a lot of people interested in React Native now, once again to try and get unified. Azure, very, very strong, and people are still using Google Cloud Platform. Rust. Who here has heard of Rust? No one? Wow. Rust is a new low-level language as an alternative to C++, and a lot of the big companies are beginning to write systems in Rust. If you're into system stuff, it's something to actually look at. In terms of other skills, particularly if you're a developer, you're expected to know source code management, which is Git, GitHub, GitLab, Git something. Jira is the de facto standard. You should know how to use that. Slack, very common. Obviously, most people are now using an agile approach with the whole DevOps philosophy. Your ability to work in a team is key and important. Your ability to think. English, and I'll get to this in a minute, but English is probably the skill that is worth the most money to you at the moment. If you have good, fluent English, that will get you more money than almost anything, and I'll try and get that. Particularly if you can work at an international level, because that gives you access to a lot of international jobs, and they're the ones that pay real money. People are still looking for a positive attitude, and they want to see that you're not changing jobs every 3 months, but it's there. Now you'll see this QR code in a lot of places here today. By all means, go in and have a look. I will just open up this page here, and I'd just like to explain a little bit about this. Link. One of the things I really like to try and point out here is that it doesn't matter whether you're a Thai foreigner, you'll get similar salaries. But if you can't work at an international level, your salary might be 25 to 40% less than these numbers. So instead of getting 150,000 baht a month, you might be only getting 100,000 baht a month. English is probably worth at least 30,000 baht a month to you or more right now. So that's why I'd say that is one of your most key skills to have. Also, people used to think a lot in terms of years of experience, but honestly, once you get past about 3 or 4 years, people are much more interested in how good you are. If you're a great developer, salaries are going up very, very quickly. These ranges, once again, are indicative, but it's trying to give you some idea, and if you want to talk to me or Nick or any of the other people in the company, just click through and I'll tell you who's there. Just quickly, what we're seeing for the software developers now is that almost nothing is, if you've got a couple of years experience, really we're seeing very little below 50,000 baht a month. But if you've got 10 years experience, and it might be less than that, by the way, and you really know what you're doing, then we're beginning to see salaries up there at 180, 190,000 baht a month mark, which are just numbers that we didn't see before. I mean, you'd always sort of see 1 or 2 people out there, but we're consistently seeing things at a higher level. Golang, Node.js, TypeScript are typically paying a little bit more than Java, C#, PHP, and Python's missing from that. That should also be there. If you're doing something exotic, Ruby on Rails, I'm afraid, is exotic these days, or Elixir, or you're doing Hyperledger Fabric, it's really hard to gauge because some quite silly prices are being paid for that. Front-end developers, I don't know where they've all gone. We can't find them anymore. So whereas React guys with a few years experience were getting only 60K before, now the senior people, you're seeing really big numbers being paid for them. Mobile developers, we've seen less demand for. UI, UX, I'd say, is more modest. Software testers, manual testers were typically only getting 30 to 40K before. Now we're seeing them get up towards 100,000 baht a month. If you're an automated tester, you have awesome opportunities there. And if you're a genuine test leader or QA manager, then we're talking about numbers that we never used to see. I remember we placed a really good QA manager at about 75K a month. We got them up from 60K a month maybe 4 years ago. Massive change in that. Cloud engineers, site reliability engineers, strong demand, once again, depends upon your skill. DevOps, slightly more complex. Product managers, I think people are beginning to realise that, and if you're really good, they will pay numbers, but only this sort of number is coming for people who really can operate at an international level when they do this. Just being a team lead is not necessarily worth so much money, but it works. Tech leads, architects, once again, you've really got to know what you're doing, you've got to understand cloud and the language, but we are seeing these kinds of numbers. I had one candidate who got this number quite recently, actually. Some of the other ones are more the management roles that come with more years of experience, so the numbers are higher. We see less of those opportunities, so even if you're a great CTO or a great ERP project manager, they may not come up so often. But these are the sorts of salaries people are getting. Yeah. So as you can see, there are really good careers in IT at the moment. Perhaps just in closing, I'm very old. I might look younger than I am, but I was actually a programmer in 1978. And people were telling me, Shane, you've got to stop being a programmer because by 1990, we're not going to write programs anymore. We're going to use like codeless systems and you should stop being a developer. So that was 40 years ago, and all that's happened now is that the demand for developers is sky high. So good career opportunities there. Some of the roles are not here because literally we don't have enough data for them. But just click on the QR code and you should be able to see what they are. And sorry, yeah, that's pretty much it for me. There's nothing else much to my presentation. So does anyone have any questions? Oh, cool. I did a great job with the order. Yes?
Do you think in like 10 years when the pandemic is gone and many kids nowadays is encouraged to be a developer, do you think in that time the demand is still high?
It's always hard to know. And it is forcing people to go to no-code and no-code platforms. But in 40 years, it hasn't changed. So to be honest, I'm not sure in 10 years' time it's going to change. Is anyone here ever seen the original Star Trek series? Because in it, they would be there and they get up there and say, computer, can you please calculate the time it will take us to get to the next destination and take into account intergalactic and gravitational variables? And the computer would go computing and they'd say, please lock in and do it. That sort of stuff isn't happening, and we're light years from it. Anyone who works with a computer every day knows that they have to push data across. They want something to be integrated, but it just doesn't happen like that. Is that going to come in 10 years' time? I don't know, but honestly, I think there's going to be strong demand there for quite a long time. I honestly can't say what it'll be beyond that, but for the immediate future, we just don't see it going away. You may need to learn new technologies, but people who can understand technical things, your future is bright. Teach your kids to be geeks. They'll make a lot of money to look after you. If you're a developer now, go out, make tons of money, enjoy yourselves. Anything else? I don't want to hold you guys up from lunch. Okay. Well, look, thank you very much for coming today. Thanks for coming along. Thanks again also to the organisers and to all the support staff. So if you see these guys here, please thank them for the effort they're putting in today. It's a really big deal to do. We really appreciate it, and hopefully by next year we'll all be able to be back in person. Okay, thanks very much. Oh no, that's okay. Well, normally I'm used to using my own computer, so it's fine. This, you asked about this. Silly. Sure.
Stop recording. Go to lunch.